Civil Air Patrol Color Guard presents the colors of today's event, and to please remain standing as the GEHS Choir will perform the Star-Spangled Banner.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. Still there, oh say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Once again, thank you to the Civil Air Patrol Color Guard, who will return at the end of our ceremonies to retire the colors. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce to you today's host. He is a teacher, a coach, and a veteran of the United States Air Force, Mr. Jason Rabel.
Ladies and gentlemen, students and staff, we are here today to pay our respects to our military veterans. As a veteran of the United States Air Force and a staff member here at GEHS, it is my honor to welcome you all to celebrate the men and women of our armed forces. I will forever be grateful for the opportunity to serve my country and to stand beside my brothers and sisters in arms. On behalf of our school, we say thank you to all the veterans and active duty members here with us today. I also want to say thank you to Mrs. Schrack for all her hard work and the time in making this assembly so special. Today, we pay our respects to the historical significance of honoring the men and women who have served and continue to serve for all of us. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in November 1918, the guns of August fell silent across the 470-mile western front of trenches and fortifications on the decimated battlefields of France, ending the Great War, or what many of you know as World War I. With 16 million dead worldwide and over 20 million wounded, the casualty rate of the Great War seemed surreal after the ceasefire, or armistice, was enacted after almost 5 years of continual fighting among the great military powers of the world. This day, 100 years ago, November 11th, was recognized by then President Woodrow Wilson in 1919 as Armistice Day, in honor of the 4.7 million U.S. soldiers who served in World War I and the 110,000 soldiers who paid the ultimate sacrifice by giving their lives on the fields of battle. Following World War II, the greatest generation's victory over fascism in Europe and militarism in the Empire of Japan, and Emporia, Kansas shoe store owner Alfred King and Kansas U.S. Representative Ed Reese, also from Emporia, presented a bill to the United States Congress to turn Armistice Day into recognizing all veterans for their service. The United States Congress approved the bill. It was signed into federal law in 1954 by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Kansas veteran and former Supreme Allied Commander of military forces in World War II. It was from this point that Veterans Day came to recognize all veterans, past and present. Today, we reflect on the veterans that walk among us. We see them every day. Parents, grandparents, siblings, friends, co-workers, former students, and rarely know of what they did or their contributions to our freedom and liberty at home. Many of these veterans leave a lasting legacy that impacts those around us, as well as the generations that follow their services. Today, we use the poppy flower to symbolize and remember veterans wounded or who have fallen in combat. The Remembrance Poppy was inspired by the World War I poem In Flanders Field. Its opening lines refer to the many poppies that were the first flowers to grow in the churned up earth of soldiers' graves in Flanders, a region of Belgium where over 105,000 casualties with 15,000 killed in action. The poem was written by Canadian physician Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae on May 3, 1915, after witnessing the death of his friend, a fellow soldier, the day before, and was first published in 1915, and is written from the point of view of dead soldiers symbolized by the poppy flowers that grew on the field of battle. We have many veterans as honored guests with us today. We would like to thank you for your service. Would you please stand now so we can recognize your presence today. As well today, we have a chair draped with the American flag to recognize those veterans who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. This day we think of those who have given their life and sacrificed all for the freedom we enjoy. We are all connected to a veteran. Students, if you are related to a veteran who is currently serving in the armed forces, please stand and remain standing. Students who have had a family member that is or has been a veteran, this includes grandparents, uncles, and extended family, please stand. You all can have a seat, thank you. You can see the connections with us all and how Veterans Day is important to so many. We thank you all. Please welcome the GEHS Choir and Ms. Lindsay Cochran.
We the people, blessed beyond measure, joined together by history, heritage, and hope, heirs to those who gave their all in order to form a more perfect union. We the people, who are the recipients and guardians of this land, inhabited by the free and protected by the brave, who pledge allegiance to the same flag, protect the same Constitution, and share this portion of our planet, the great country we love, the United States of America, our homeland.
Now it's my privilege to introduce today's featured speaker. Our speaker was a member of the United States Navy and active duty for 4 years from 1987 through 1991, including the first Gulf War, aboard the USS Acadia. After 2 additional years of reserve service, our speaker went back to college at Nebraska Wesleyan University, where he received his degree in language arts education. His teaching career has spanned 26 years, with stops in Coffeyville, Cherryville, and Ottawa, all in Kansas. In his last 16 years, here's a trailblazer at Gardner-Edgerton High School. Our speaker is married to Amy, also a teacher, 25 years, currently working in the Blue Valley School District. Together they have 2 adult children, Abigail and Blaze, both graduates of Gardner-Edgerton High School. Our speaker is your debate teacher and coach, Mr. Mike Zegers.
Mr. Meyer, Mr. Radel, Mrs. Schrack, and students of GEHS and honored guests, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today. In Act 2, Scene 5 of William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, we hear Malvolio utter the famous line, "Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Thy fates open their hands, let thy blood and spirit embrace them." Well, I had the honor of speaking today thrust upon me. When Mrs. Schrack asked me to speak to you today, I didn't really want to. I wasn't afraid, I wasn't busy, but I couldn't come up with an excuse. I knew she would see right through me. Then she told me that the theme of today's ceremony was service. Wow. Way to make me feel bad. So I had a duty to do. I had an obligation. I would take this honor that was thrust upon me, and I would make the best of it. I stand up here and I look out there amongst you all, and I know exactly what you are all thinking. Really? Zegers is in the military? He's a veteran? Wow, I feel so much safer knowing Zegers is out there. Well, I did, and I am. From the late 1980s to the early 1990s, I was a damage controlman in the United States Navy. I spent most of my time on a tender repairing parts for other ships and practicing donning my fire proximity suit, which is this shiny suit that we used for firefighting. Most of them were either chemical or electrical fires. And our ship was also used for transporting Marines. And I remember often getting into arguments with the Marines because they always called me a squid. That quickly changed as soon as I showed them the definition of squid, a higher form of marine life. But yes, I was in the military, and I was not what you would call, as some of you more experienced here today may remember, I was not the sailor of the century for any means. For me, the military was a way for me to grow up and help me pay my way through college. Most of you weren't even around to remember what was going on at the time, but it wasn't much different than what's going on now. We were in Iraq. I personally didn't do too much during the war other than bob around in the Persian Gulf, but I was there. I was there just as many of your fathers, mothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or brothers and sisters were or currently are. When Mrs. Schrack asked me to deliver this message to you, I wasn't really sure what I would say. I didn't want to come off as a recruiting poster, but I also didn't know if I had the passion to talk about the patriotism. In previous years, Mr. Radel, Mrs. Boone, Mr. Wilson's father, or Mr. Cochran would talk to you all about Veterans Day and what an important holiday it is. What could I possibly bring to you that these passionate people couldn't? So like I tell my students, talk about what you know best. Self-disclose. I grew up in a military family. My father was a career Navy man. He enlisted when he was 15 years old, sorry. So as most military kids, I moved around every couple of years and I never saw much of my dad. Being in the service was his life, his passion. He was always being deployed for months at a time. I sort of hated him for it. Other kids' dads were at home, coaching them in sports, taking them fishing, playing catch, talking to them about girls. I was too young to realize what was going on. I never took the time to think about what he was doing. I never really understood the importance of being a veteran until the death of my father, who passed away about 25 years ago. Like I said earlier, he was in the Navy for 30 years. He lived, breathed, ate, and drank everything Navy. Half of his life was being a part of the military. He was extremely proud of his military accomplishments, but he was most proud of being part of the initial group of sailors who went to Antarctica in 1955 as a member of Operation Deep Freeze. He actually made 2 trips to Antarctica during his Navy tenure. As a child, I watched slideshow after slideshow after slideshow of the Emperor penguins, the McMurdo Station, where they were housed, and the planes landing, de-icing ships. Oh, what's that? What's a slide? Oh, a slide's a little square thing about this big, and you put it into a machine, and it would go around in a circle with pictures up on the wall. I remember looking through his sea bag and finding what looked like a wooden mask. It was a piece of wood made to fit his face, and it had 2 slits about an inch long cut into it. And a rubber band was cut in half and stapled to each end to go around the back of his head. It was actually a pair of pseudo sunglasses that he had to make to prevent from getting snowblind. As a kid, I thought it was pretty cool. I actually still have them. As I grew older, I began to realize the importance of his duty, his service, a little more. The men that he had wintered with in Antarctica and worked with on his ships were part of his family. They were part of our family. They kept in touch for years and years, and I never really thought much about it until a few years ago when I received a phone call. It was from one of my father's best friends. I had never spoken with him, however. I had known his father as one of my best friend's sons, I had never spoken with him. He flew a plane and he would fly in to see us about once a year. The phone call was quick and somber. Mike, you don't know me, but our dads are best friends, and I wanted to let you know that my dad has passed away. He was the last remaining member of Operation Deep Freeze 1955. I just thought I would let you know. Why was that phone call important? To me, it was important for a couple of reasons. First, to let me know that the last of my dad's friends and legacy to his Antarctica experience was gone. Second, to let me know that even though I didn't know the caller, we were family. We were a military family, and I don't want to see this become a dying breed. It was his duty as a son to relay the message to everyone who knew his father. I'm not sure if the story has much to do with Veterans Day, but I do know that at that time I really never understood how important military is to me. I'm not one who talks about the Navy a lot, but for those 4 years, those men and women were my family. They were the people with whom I worked side by side. I am no longer in the Navy, but it is responsible for who I am. It is also responsible for where I am today. If it weren't for the military, I would not be a teacher. I would not be here working with my family, the teachers, administration, and most importantly, the students of Gardner-Edgerton High School. If we look around this auditorium, look at the people on either side of us, in front of us, or behind us, we can thank a veteran. Mr. Cochran had you stand up early, Mr. Rayo had you stand up earlier, and imagine all the people we stood up for, all working together somewhere in the world to make our lives better, stronger, and freer. Some gave their lives so that we could have ours. Even though you may or may not be looking at the military as a future endeavor, those who have created a family for us. We all have ties to the military. We are all a family. We need to honor and cherish those who have left us, as well as those who sit next to us, and hope, really hope, that we don't receive the phone call that says our last family member is gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zeggers. What a great message. I'm not sure how you all interpreted that, but I'll give you my simple interpretation. Mr. Zeggers, an ordinary man like most every other men and women that choose to serve, doing extraordinary things. This assembly each year is built on a lot of different traditions, things that we do every single year. And for those of you that are seniors, you probably recognize that by now. The next piece is my favorite part. This is the salute to the armed forces as performed by the high school choir. We always invite the veterans that are here in attendance today, when you hear your respective branch of service song, to please stand and be recognized. Thank you.
Our homeland, so beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved and mercy more than life. Staying united as a nation does not come without triumph and does not come without tragedy. America has endured wars, both foreign and domestic. This land remains the home of the free because it remains the home of the brave. Throughout our history, men and women have answered the nation's call to protect and defend those rights and freedoms we hold sacred. Some walk among us in battlefield dress, ready to board the next flight to stand in our stead in harm's way. Some walk among us unnoticed, but they carry the satisfaction of memories of victories won and the scars of friends forgotten. Some walk among us, unable to walk among us, because they bear the horrendous wounds of battle. And some are not able to walk among us, for they are the fallen patriots who live on in the heart of a grateful nation. Our debt cannot be adequately paid, but our chance to honor our heroes cannot happen enough. As the song from your branch of service is sung, would all of our active military and veterans please rise so we may thank you for protecting our homeland.
Baker and Ms. Kennard, GEHS choirs. I'd like to give out a couple of things while the Civil Air Patrol is beginning to make their way up for the retirement of colors. You've heard Mrs. Strack's name mentioned a few times. Students, you probably know this already, but this event would not take place without her leadership each and every year. So if you would, please help me give her a round of applause. All the performers here today, Lindsay Cochran, Riley Templeton, everyone in attendance. I would also like to say thank you to the high school custodial staff and the district maintenance crew. We obviously had some unexpected weather that we had to prepare for, but they still managed to get the facility in perfect order for today. And we want to thank them very much for all of their efforts each and every day. This time, the Civil Air Patrol Color Guard will return to retire the colors, and we'll play the following of taps to close out our ceremony today by Carter Allenbrand and Nathan Proctor. Thank you once again, Carter and Nathan, the Civil Air Patrol Color Guard. Students, thank you for being a great audience today, a great host for our guests here. I want to remind our guests that there is a reception that you're all invited to attend if you so choose in the Library and Media Center here at the high school. Either way, please have a safe travel home. We know that the situation out there is less than ideal at this time of year. We greatly appreciate your attention. attendance today. Students, thank you so much for another wonderful